Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. This will be our last video for Unit 2 in population. Today we're specifically talking about migration, the movement of people. Today what we're going to be looking at is a group of movement or a section of movement called short-term local movement and activity space. Basically what we're looking at is, instead of really looking at migration and long-term movements of people to new places, we're looking at the types of movements that people might do on a regular basis as a part of their everyday life, and places that they're going to go for the short term. Because as you know, we all move about in our spaces. We move on a regular basis and a daily basis. Really everybody moves. Even if we look at people living in the Amazon rainforest, they move within their space. They just don't go a long distance, and they're not necessarily migrating to a new place. And so it's really important to understand this whole idea of short-term movement and local movement, because it's going to tell us a lot about a people. It's going to tell us a lot about what's important to them, because obviously wherever they're going is a place that's important to them, and it's going to tell us something about the values. It's also going to tell us something about the level of development, because we look at, well, how are they getting there? We can look, is it people who are moving around in cars? Are they taking some sort of public transportation? Are they walking? Are they bicycling? What exactly is going on there? What are they moving for? Are they moving for work? Is it maybe a mom who stays at home who's running chores? Is it the hunter-gatherer who's moving to go and gather food for his family? Again, when we analyze those things, it helps us to understand the people and the place just a little bit better. So again, when we look at short-term local movement, this is referring to when geographers really are just studying the space that you interact with on a regular basis, and this is what we call the activity space. And this idea of activity space is really going to depend and fluctuate on based on several different variables. It could depend and fluctuate based upon how old you are. If you're someone in school, a student still in high school, your activity space is probably going to be limited to obviously going to and from school and whatever else other activities you participate in. Whether you're in extracurriculars or sports, or maybe you participate in religious activities on the weekend. So that's going to cause you to have a specific set of activity space. If you're an adult, maybe going to work every day, that's going to cause you to interact with a particular activity space. It's going to depend and fluctuate based upon where you live. If you live in the suburbs and work in the city, your activity space is going to be much larger than maybe someone who lives in the city and works in the city and doesn't necessarily have to commute as far. So again, it's really going to be very personal, and it's really going to help us to understand people. Maybe, and again, when we look at the things that they value, we look at the lifestyle that they're living, which is going to cause them to have this particular type of activity space in the movement that we do. Now, when we look at short-term movements, we classify them in three different types. We have what's called cyclical movement, seasonal movement, and then periodic movement. So we'll go ahead and look at cyclical first. When we look at cyclical movement, what we're referring to really is just your personal daily routine. And this is really kind of what I was referring to just a few minutes ago. That daily routine is going to vary based upon several different things. It can depend on your age. It can depend on where it is that you're living. It can depend on what level of development of country you live in. Because if you're someone who is in a less developed country, maybe you don't have access to motorized transportation, your daily routine is going to be much more confined in terms of the space that you can travel than someone who has access to personalized motorized transportation. And so again, this can be anything that just happens as a part of your daily routine. And you think back to our discussion on mental maps, this daily routine, the cyclical movement that you're a part of, is really going to impact the mental map and the way that you understand the space in which you live and the space that surrounds you. When we look at seasonal movement, it's pretty much exactly what it's like what it sounds. It's movement based upon seasonal change, and this is primarily people who are going to be working in some sort of agricultural sector, or they're going to be doing their livelihood is going to be based on seasons. So we might have somebody who does some sort of seasonal work, and probably one of the things that comes to my mind, at least initially, are migrant workers, especially those who might work in agricultural sectors. Seasonal workers who are going to, based upon the different seasons and what's growing, they're going to move from one place to another so that they can then gather the next crops. And we see a good bit of that in the United States. A lot of migrant workers out in California who move up and down the state, as the different crops come into season. In Georgia, we have migrant workers who go from the south, working on the peanut farms or the onion farms, and then they'll come up to the north. We have apple season and peach season, and blueberry season and things like that, and so you see some migrant workers there. Then we have a specific type of seasonal movements called transhumance. This applies specifically to those who are pastoral farmers and pastoral herders. If you're familiar at all with the people who live out in Mongolia on the steppe, they are, several of those types of people they'll be participating in pastoral farming and transhumance. And this gets back to a day and age when people did this more often. They were these pastoral nomads and pastoral farmers, and kept animals year round, and so they needed large amounts of space. But then you've got to be able to keep your animals alive during the cold season, and so what you do is you move your animals depending on the season. So during the warmer months, you're going to move your cattle to the highlands, where it's a little bit cooler, and the animals will do better, and there's grasses and pastures. But during the winter months, you move your animals to the lowlands to seek the shelter of hills, and also to try and seek shelter for yourself. And so again, a lot of it has to do with the moving of your animals to keep them alive during the different times of the year. Then this last one is what we call periodic movement. Now, periodic movement is movement that it's not a permanent move, but it's longer than just a daily movement or something that's going to be seasonal. It's something that typically is going to take place over several years, but during that time, you know that you're going to be coming back. Again, it's just a temporary movement, and a lot of the periodic movement is going to depend on what stage of life you're in. It's going to depend on maybe what type of job you have, and so you see some different examples there. Somebody going off to college. You spend several years away at college, but you really have no intention of staying in the college town after you graduate. So you get your degree and then you move on. So your interaction with that space is going to be much different than if you were actually living there, fully vested in the community and those types of things. If you're in the military, you go off to base. You might be deployed for a while. You come back to base. You get moved around to different bases. And then maybe you have an internship. You're in school. You have an internship with a company in a different city, something like that. You know that you're not going to be staying for, you don't know for sure if you're staying. Hopefully, maybe you get the job after the internship. But again, it's still considered to be a short-term movement, and eventually you move on. So the periodic movement helps us understand some of these stages in people's lives where they're making something that's longer than just a really short-term movement, but it's definitely not going to be a permanent move. So that's it for Unit 2. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful. Come back soon, and we'll be looking at Unit 3, Dealing with Culture.